Callum had never considered that drifting through a galaxy on a starship might feel like being an extra in someone else's poorly staged theater production. But as he floated down the Vespera*S corridors, he began to suspect that was exactly what it was. The walls hummed with a soft, almost conspiratorial vibration, and the floor beneath him wasn't so much a floor as a suggestion of a floor, its anti-gravity panels making him wobble like a toddler on stilts. He muttered to himself, practicing the lines he would use if he ever encountered an alien intelligent enough to notice him. "Greetings, I come in peace. Also, do you have snacks?" It sounded less diplomatic out loud, and even less so when his foot accidentally collided with a maintenance drone, which scuttled off while muttering in a language that sounded like a cross between whale song and a dial-up modem. He was about to give up hope, muttering that maybe he had boarded the wrong ship or signed up for an interstellar reality show called *Humans Who Can't Space*, when he saw her. Lysara. She emerged from the shadows of the observation deck like a ripple in the starlight, her long ears swaying in a rhythm he didn't yet understand, but instinctively wanted to. She had a human shape, soft eyes that seemed to store entire nebulae, and hair that caught the fluorescent glow of the ship like strands of liquid night. Callum froze, remembering all the advice books about first contact. Be calm. Do not appear panicked. Avoid tripping over your own species' appendages. Naturally, he did the opposite. Hi, he said, and then, for no reason he could explain, added, do you, come here often? Lysara's head tilted, ears twitching in a way that made him wonder if they were some kind of antenna. Mostly when I want to avoid talking to bureaucrats, she said, and the words were punctuated by a soft chime that might have been laughter. Callum's stomach somersaulted. He said, avoiding bureaucrats is universal, apparently. She floated closer, and he noticed for the first time the faint shimmer across her skin, like starlight caught in a soap bubble. He forced a joke. Is that a new space moisturizer? I've heard the zero-gravity environment can really dry out. You're funny, she interrupted, and he wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an observation that humans were ridiculous. Do you always talk this much when nervous? I try to. It's a hobby, he said. His feet, still attempting to obey earthly laws of gravity, refused to cooperate. He ended up in a semi-graceful, mostly humiliating tumble, which Lysara apparently found highly entertaining. Her ears twitched rapidly, a motion he decided must be her equivalent of clapping. Over the next few days, Callum found himself stumbling through rituals he didn't understand. She invited him to try her favorite foods, fruits that glowed faintly in response to touch, emitting sparks of aroma that made his human senses short-circuit. He once tried to bite into a blue orb that literally floated away from him, and Lysara had laughed so hard that her entire torso tilted back, making him swear he'd accidentally invented a new form of zero-gravity slapstick comedy. She would tease him endlessly, calling him clumsy as a neutron star in a tutu, but her laughter was infectious, and slowly that ridiculousness became a kind of comfort. But he also began to see the fragility beneath her humor. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, her shimmer dimmed, faint and trembling like a candle in the void. She would joke about cosmic indigestion, or claim that her body was merely experimenting with new light patterns, but Callum caught the silence in her long ears, the slight hesitation in her steps. He asked her once, "Are you okay?" "Of course," she said, ears flicking toward the ceiling. "I'm just perfecting my dramatic pauses. They say it adds mystery." He didn't laugh that time. Instead, he reached for her hand, fumbling and almost knocking over a holographic display, and she didn't pull away. The warmth of her grip was alien, electric, terrifying, and yet exactly what he needed. In those quiet moments between jokes, between failed culinary experiments and botched zero-gravity somersaults, Callum realized he was falling, and there was no anti-gravity panel strong enough to save him. By the time they were exploring the bioluminescent corridors of her homeworld, he had learned that humor could bridge gaps wider than the distance between stars, that mistakes could be charming if delivered with enough sincerity, and that love, terrifying, urgent, absurd love, was worth every awkward tumble, every sparkling hiccup, and every cosmic joke they shared, even if the universe itself seemed determined to remind them that time was short. Callum had thought he was prepared for cultural differences, but nothing in the flight manuals, or the 12 awkward interstellar etiquette workshops he'd endured, had prepared him for Lysara's bonding rituals. He followed her through corridors that glowed like liquid rainbows, his human legs wobbling as anti-gravity fields played tricks on his coordination. She moved with a grace that made him feel like a boulder attempting ballet, her long ears swaying in a rhythm he could not yet discern, twitching occasionally as if each movement were a musical note. "Try to keep up," she said, her voice teasing but soft, and he tried, colliding with a floating orb of luminescent energy which spun away like a small, offended star. "Are these alive?" he asked, straightening up, brushing stardust from his sleeve. "They're semi-sentient," she replied, her lips twitching as if she held back a laugh. "Mostly polite and less provoked, and you just provoked them. Congratulations." He attempted a bow, which in zero gravity looked more like a flailing propeller, and Lysara laughed so hard that her ears twitched furiously, casting faint reflections across the walls. "You're hopeless," she said fondly. "And that's why you're perfect." The bonding ritual began with floating orbs. Callum had to catch them in midair and whisper a phrase he could not pronounce, each syllable a tangle of tones and clicks. He botched it immediately, mumbling something that sounded like a sneeze in 3 parts. Lysara blinked, then flared her nostrils in amusement, her ears vibrating faintly. "You just summoned a minor starquake. Well done." Next was the luminous nectar ceremony. Callum tried to drink gracefully, as instructed, and inhaled a bubble that popped on his nose, spraying neon liquid in random directions. Lysara, hovering beside him with perfect composure, flicked her wrist, and a small tendril of light cleaned the mess midair. "At least you taste good," she said, and he snorted. "I meant the nectar," she added quickly, but the damage was done. Callum's attempt at elegance had turned into slapstick genius, and she laughed until the corridors seemed to shimmer with her amusement. As the day wore on, Callum noticed that even amid the humor, the shimmer in her skin faltered at times, dimming like a dying pulse of starlight. She caught him staring once and waved him off. "I'm just testing gravity's patience," she joked, but he wasn't fooled. He had seen the brief shadows in her eyes, the micropauses where her laughter faltered. Determined to bring joy instead of worry, he began keeping a record of every mistake, every awkward attempt, and every ridiculous incident, scribbling stick-figure versions of the glowing orbs, labeling them Orb Friends 112. Survived Callum's chaos. Lysara peeked at one entry and laughed so hard that she snorted, a sound that made Callum's chest tighten with something he couldn't name. He realized he wanted to protect her, even from the universe itself, and even from the embarrassing human clumsiness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. In a quiet corridor that wound between walls of bioluminescent flora, Callum tried to speak sincerely. "Lysara, I want to understand you, really understand. All of this, your world, your people. I don't want to mess it up." She reached out, ears brushing his shoulder in a gesture that was intimate and electric. "You're already doing it," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Even when you fail spectacularly." He swallowed and attempted humor, because humor felt like the only weapon against the growing anxiety that pressed at his chest. "Well, in that case, I'm spectacular at failing. Gold medal, possibly intergalactic." She tilted her head, letting a faint spark of amusement flicker across her gaze. "You are, but it's charming." They continued through the forested halls, gathering luminous fruits that floated in midair, each bite tingling with electrical warmth. Callum tried to make a game of it, tossing fruits at her like a zero-gravity carnival, only for one to bounce off his forehead and explode in neon sparks. Lysara laughed until her ears vibrated, and for a moment he imagined time could pause here, that the universe might bend to let them linger forever in this absurd, joyous bubble. But reality tugged at the edges of their levity. The shimmer in her skin grew weaker with each day, a quiet counterpoint to the hilarity of spilled nectar, floating orbs, and human ineptitude. Callum realized that every joke, every misstep was a stolen moment, a bid to stretch joy across the finite space they had together. He began practicing a speech, half solemn, half ridiculous, filled with promises he wasn't sure he could keep. And in the spaces between laughter, he whispered to himself that he would find a way, somehow, to make the universe slow down, if only a little, so he could keep dancing through these corridors with her ears twitching at his every misadventure. By the time the stars outside gleamed like shards of crystal against the void, Callum understood that love was not just about perfection or rituals. It was about absurdity, shared mistakes, stolen sparks, and moments so human and so alien that the universe might simply step aside in awe. Even if Lysara's life was borrowed time, they would fill it with such ridiculous, magnificent living that the stars themselves would have to take notice. Callum floated in the council chamber, his human frame wobbling like a buoy in a solar storm, as bureaucrats argued over whether a human could ethically participate in an alien bonding ritual. He waved his arms, nearly toppling a hovering console, and shouted, "I promise I won't eat the ceremonial nectar unless instructed. I'm basically harmless." A minor explosion of neon sparks erupted in the corner, likely from a disgruntled orb, and a long-haired alien council member glared at him. Lysara's ears twitched and she leaned close, whispering, "You are an embarrassment, and I adore it." Callum swallowed, straightened his floating posture, and attempted dignity. "I may be an embarrassment," he said, "but my love is interstellar grade. I've logged all incidents, failures, and heroic missteps in a holographic journal. I even drew stick figures of your ancestors, nicely, I think." Lysara smirked, her eyes glinting with amusement and something warmer, and he realized that in the midst of cosmic protocol and absurd regulations, their bond had already begun to reshape him. Where once he had been clumsy, hesitant, and terrified of alien worlds, he now embraced unpredictability with a kind of audacious courage. The ceremony began with floating orbs, each one circling them like impatient stars. Callum had memorized the phrases, though his pronunciation was still comically off, and he whispered them with a mixture of determination and tremulous excitement. One orb spun away, heading toward the ceiling, and he darted after it, flailing spectacularly, causing Lysara to laugh so hard her ears vibrated like twin comets. He caught the orb, nearly toppling over another, and she pressed a hand to his chest, steadying him, murmuring, "You're perfect at being human." Next came the luminous nectar, poured into floating chalices. Callum took a careful sip, trying not to inhale and explode the ceremony with a neon hiccup. His timing was perfect, though he accidentally made a face mid-sip that had Lysara snorting in delight. "You look like a surprised space platypus," she said, and he bowed, mock-offended, earning another ripple of laughter. Finally, the vows. Callum held Lysara's hands, feeling the faint shimmer in her skin, more fragile now, like a candle in microgravity. He tried to speak eloquently, but his words tumbled in human fashion. "I promise," he began, "to laugh with you, to fail spectacularly beside you, to make you smile even when the universe tries to collapse in on us. And also, I promise to never steal your favorite cosmic snacks except maybe once, and only if they look really good." Lysara's ears twitched, a subtle quiver that conveyed more emotion than any council approval ever could. "I promise," she said, "to teach you the music of my world, to share my absurdities, and to endure your human chaos because somehow it fits." Her voice trembled with light, a shimmer that pulsed like a heartbeat, and for a moment the stars outside paused in envy. The council members murmured their approval, though most looked baffled at the combination of sincerity and slapstick they had just witnessed. Callum didn't care. Lysara leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek, and for the first time in weeks he felt the shadow of her illness lessen, not gone, but softened by joy and courage, and the ridiculous courage of a human who refused to be anything but himself. As they floated from the chamber into the glittering corridors of her homeworld, Callum realized how much he had changed. He had learned that love was not about perfection, protocol, or avoiding mistakes. It was about presence, audacious humor, and willingness to face the finite nature of life with open arms. He had discovered patience, empathy, and the ability to laugh in the face of cosmic absurdity, and he knew now that even the looming specter of mortality could not diminish the brilliance of shared joy. Lysara glanced at him, ears flicking in amusement. "Ready for our zero-gravity picnic?" she asked, holding a basket of floating fruits that glowed like tiny suns. "Only if I get to wear the ceremonial cape this time," he said, spinning in midair with mock dignity. One of the fruits bounced off his shoulder, and she laughed so freely that Callum felt as if the universe itself had exhaled. They drifted together, hand in hand, through forests of bioluminescent flora that pulsed with the rhythm of distant stars. Callum's journal floated nearby, pages occasionally flipping as if even it wanted to witness this perfect absurdity. They tossed fruit, joked about interstellar traffic violations, and argued playfully over whether human jokes could truly rival long-eared alien humor. As the twin suns of her world set, casting long streaks of violet and gold across the sky, Callum understood that the urgency of life had been transformed into a celebration of existence. Lysara's illness was still present, but it no longer haunted the edges of their happiness. Every laugh, every failed attempt at grace, every shared glance was a victory over time itself. And in that quiet, glittering moment, drifting above a world that shimmered with both life and absurdity. Callum realized that love, messy, imperfect, human, could bend even the vast, indifferent universe to the rhythm of their laughter. He squeezed her hand, whispered a joke about interstellar laundry, and she laughed, ears fluttering like twin banners of light. They were partners, companions, and mischief-makers, and in each other's arms they had found a cosmos worth living for, one sparkling, ridiculous, perfect moment at a time.